Now we are. Okay.
Should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have called the meeting order, done a quick roll call, and provided the statement of public notice. Now we are on item 4, the meeting minutes from the first strategic planning meeting. I didn't know if anybody had any comments on those. Actually, before I do that, let me touch on meeting logistics just a little bit, because I think the village board is comfortable with sort of how things have been going. CDA, I think some of this might be newer. So for the most part, people will be on mute. And if you want to ask a question or comment, there is the raise hand functionality that you can utilize, and we'll try and keep an eye on that. And if we don't see you and you're trying to say something, then actually raise your hand maybe, and we'll try to see you that way. But again, the village board has, I think, worked through a lot of this and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. But I would just ask for everybody's flexibility in this virtual environment. Love to have everybody participate, but I think we'll obviously have some challenges. Just for example, I'm on an iPad, I can't necessarily see everybody on one screen. So if you're raising a hand, Rebecca or Bart might just remind me that someone else is asking. So with that said, does anybody have any comments on the minutes from the prior meeting? I do have a few very minor grammatical items, and I will just pass those on to staff after this meeting. But with that said, if there are no comments, do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move approval.
Do I have a second? Get a thumbs up from Dusty.
He's still muted.
Can we unmute him just to get his official
There we
approval?
go.
All
Yeah,
right.
I think
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now, okay, sorry, for logistic purposes, how do we do that if everybody's muted? How do we officially know? Should I do a roll call and go through everybody, or Bart, what's your recommendation on that? Just to be official.
I could, or you could ask if anyone has any objections. They could.
That's better. Okay.
Otherwise, we'll presume everyone's in favor.
Does anybody have any objections? Please do the raise hand functionality. Okay, I see no. So minutes pass. Thank you, everybody. Now to the fun part of the meeting. Okay, item 5. This is the second meeting of this. Our first meeting was March 12th, which seems like a lifetime ago, and to a large degree, it was a lifetime ago. And we did a lot of great work at that meeting, brainstorming and coming up with some of our goals and objectives around shared objectives and village board directing the CDA with respect to activities to do. And so today is to finalize that and really come up with those clear goals and objectives that we can drive forward with, that we are all agreement on, and that provide direction to the CDA and also provide direction and clarity to staff. As the village board well knows, there's a lot of demands on staff time, and so to come up with a few important, discrete goals, objectives is really what we're looking for out of this. Obviously, there's a ton to do. We all want to do all of it. We just can't do that at this time. So we're trying to find those key points that we really need to drive forward on. So with that, we have Michaela and Art from Baker Tilly with us tonight again, as we had at the first meeting. They will be facilitating this discussion. You have materials that were sent out with the meeting. They're documents sort of capturing the essence of the original and helping us drive forward to our objectives for tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Art and Michaela to help take us through that process.
Great. Thank you, Peter. In reviewing some of the background, the survey results, the housing study summary, and the initial thoughts and ideas and possible priorities, I think there's really a great foundation for developing consensus for your community and to help guide both the staff and the elected officials and the boards and commissions and the community as you move forward. But as the village manager can attest, there's got to be some sense of priorities to these, because you can't address all these issues and challenges and great ideas at one time. There's just a limit to how much staff time, and it's going to really take developing a high level set of priorities to make it doable and make it in a way that there can be careful implementation along the way. And obviously, as some of these items are further developed and moving toward completion, or at least implemented as an ongoing tool that you utilize, then you can start to pick off some of the other priorities that have been discussed or developed. And there may be new things that arise in the next 6 months to a year that you have to consider and throw into the mix as well. But the big part is making sure everybody's on the same page as to what the priorities are. So as we go through some of the background that we've discussed, my sense was there was good consensus that the results coming out of the housing study were solid, and there seemed to be some support from some of those conclusions. And don't want to go into all the details listed in the report, but is there anything in the housing report that that anyone thinks needs to be brought up from the summary and the document that you were provided? There's somebody talking. Jessica, were you talking to us? Oh, okay, sorry. You're on mute. So wanted to ask if there was anything related to the housing report results or summary that needed to be discussed. Okay, what about the survey results? Any of those issues that anyone wanted to discuss? Thought it was a pretty good summary of an overview of the ideas and challenges and thoughts regarding how the community could improve. Any of those issues that want to be revisited by anyone?
Can you hear me? When you say, are there any issues that want to be discussed, like?
That were listed from the survey on page 2 of the document you were sent.
Page 2.
Actually, page 3, I think, right?
No, page 3 is the minutes.
It's
Oh, I'm
pages
sorry.
2 and 3.
Of their presentation, of their document.
So this page with economic development strengths, weaknesses, priorities,
Right.
housing strengths.
I don't think
housing
anything's
strengths.
changed, or there's nothing to be added to this list, right?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Under economic development weaknesses, use of public funds. Can you explain how use of public, does that mean in terms of grants and subsidies? And is that I want to understand the meaning. Grants, subsidies, loans, is that?
So this is Michaela. I can respond to that question. So when the initial survey was one of the participants that responded to the survey when asked what the economic development weaknesses of the village are. And for this particular response, that was what the weakness was listed, was the use of public funds. So that could be, that these are the results of different people's opinions, and from all of the the multiple results that were provided, these were some of the highlights of what was included in the initial survey. So someone had responded that they thought a weakness of the village was how the use of public funds had been done previously.
And so are these weighted?
They are not.
No,
These are not
not
in
in-
any particular order.
So
Yeah.
would you infer from that 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 means grants, loans, and subsidies?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. What does focused economic development priorities 1 to 3 years, focused retail areas for redevelopment development? Like we don't have really undeveloped retail areas. What does that mean, focused retail areas?
Where are you reading from?
It's economic development priorities 1 to 3 years, the
So
first
that's
one.
on page 2 of our document, economic development priorities 1 to 3 years. The first bullet is focused retail areas for redevelopment development. So my interpretation of that as a priority is again someone's response that targeting specific areas within the village that you would want to focus your, perhaps, so if we were going to the use of public funds or any sort of public participation or effort focusing on specific areas in the 1 to 3 year period to start with, knowing we can't do everything. So again, it's trying to hone in on a particular area, and in this case, focusing on retail for whether development or redevelopment. So if in your reference it's a fully built out, then we would be looking more at redevelopment versus if you had any vacant land, then perhaps redevelopment had been done and now it's new development.
Hey, can I,
But did the persons like specify a certain area, or, I mean, it could have been me who said this, because I do think that we should be targeting, more targeted in what and how we do things rather than just sort of throwing money. But I don't know if this was me. I mean, so it's like just the concept of focusing as opposed to like, let's just look at Capitol in Oakland, for example. Correct?
Well, I think the part, what we're hoping to accomplish tonight is if that is part of your top goals, then the action items would be identifying a specific area. So that's part of the ongoing, that's part of the conversation is, if this is indeed a priority as a whole, then it would be, you can't do all of the areas. So what would be, you mentioned the locations, the top 1 or 2 locations that you would want to focus on for these efforts.
can I ask a quick
Trustee Warren?
Thank you. I'll try to ask this in an eloquent way. It's kind of bouncing around in my head, so excuse me if I stumble over it a little bit. But so we outline these strengths, weaknesses, priorities, which spin off, kind of what we want to do here in terms of focusing on as a board. And I note that all of this was collected and well collected prior to COVID-19. And, our last meeting on this was March the 12th. In that time, we've seen an incredible impact economically, which is going to probably continue for the foreseeable future. I guess my question would be, is there anything that we need to change in this or look at as a different focus or redo based on the world has changed over the last 4 months? And I just don't want this to be something where we're kind of pretending that didn't happen or ignoring the impact of that. And maybe there isn't a lot to do within the context of our goal setting, but I feel like we should probably have that discussion.
Trustee Carpenter?
Yeah, that was actually kind of what I was thinking and going to say. The thing that I sort of think that we maybe want to shift our focus a little bit on is in relation to the older homes and quality that comes along with that. Also, comes along with maintenance and required upgrades. And so if there's any opportunity for us to, in light of COVID, figure out some ways that we can support people who might need to update or maintain their homes and maybe struggling to do that, You know, and maybe there are some other things that we can do to encourage people to continue to update and improve their homes so that we don't lose the quality of that housing stock. Because that is really coveted in the Milwaukee area. I think that that would be something super helpful.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll just briefly, so Trustee Warren, I totally agree with you. We've sort of talked about that as well. My thought was that as we get into the heart of this discussion and we start to narrow down kind of the priorities, goals, objectives, I think it's already in our minds, but I agree, we need to keep coming back to, you know, this current environment, this new world we're living in, and how does it impact that? So it is not necessarily documented and identified here, but I agree it's going to impact what we're talking about. So we'll just kind of keep that as part of the discussion. And then to Trustee Carpenter's point, as we get later in here and we start to, you know, discuss sort of that next level of detail with respect to goals and objectives, we do have, you know, one of the items identified as sort of maintaining the current stock, if you will, housing stock. And then what can we do if that is a priority? Then we can start identifying, okay, what, you know, we have the neighborhood loan program that was in place before, not in place now. So, you know, if we end up that is one of the top 1 to 2 priorities, then we can sort of take that next step down and say, what does that look like? What does that mean? What are we going to do? Does that answer your question on that one? So again, I agree. We're sort of doing this in the middle or beginning or wherever your interpretation is of where we are in this. So I agree. We just need to, I think, be flexible as we're going through this, but keep that in mind. I agree, so that whatever we do come up with is relevant to our current world.
Chair Hammond, Trustee Stokebrand raised her hand.
Oh, okay.
So my question is, do the consultants that we've hired to help us with this process have ideas about moving forward with the COVID economic collapse? And what lens should we look at this through in terms of, do we make a set of priorities for now A, B, C, or do we wait? What do they recommend?
Well,
The $1 million question, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that we know any more than what you know, other than what's coming down the line is throughout the country, there are going to be more people working from home over the long term. And so there's probably going to have to be some flexibility and thought given to people working out of their homes more than they have in the past. And Michaela, you really focus in on economic development. You probably have thought about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, and it's you know, part of, I think, you know, the conversations and part of the conversations we're having now is, you know, there was just the touch on how do you support people that need assistance, whether, you know, and how that, and kind of stepping back. So you've got the businesses, and I know you've kind of gone through that round of how you assist, or how you assisted the small businesses. We've got the CARES funding that's being allocated, you know, and so what we're exploring is resources, I think, that communities have to address. So once you've sort of, you know, some of it, the priorities are going to present themselves, you know, as you talked about perhaps the maintenance of homes, small business needs, things like such as that, but other opportunities that will present themselves based on what your objectives are and the areas that you want to focus on. So it's going to be, I think, kind of going through this exercise to see what are your goals, and then understanding that we can't work in a vacuum because we are in sort of unknowns, and it's continually evolving because we don't know how long this is going to go on and what the impacts are. But I think that's part of what we're also exploring is the resources that are out there, how you can use them, and if it's, you know, stepping back and dealing with perhaps thriving businesses that no longer are, and maybe that becomes a priority as opposed to chasing, working on new areas, but not any of it's going to be in isolation.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I agree. And trying to do this in the middle of it is challenging, but I feel like the current crisis we're in, I don't know, it doesn't really impact sort of our high level goals and objectives, right? Those pretty much are the same, and I think are consistent over time in terms of, supporting the business community, working on housing. And the question is, at what point, as we get down into further detail, does it affect it? And so I think part of this conversation tonight, we'll see where that starts to come up. And the other thing is, things are going to be changing, and the question is, how prescriptive do we think is appropriate to village staff to provide direction? Or do we provide direction in such a way that it's providing them with guidance so that they can be flexible to respond? Because things are going to change dramatically between, we meet again in a month or two, it's going to be very different. And so that's what I am working through in my mind with this discussion is, I don't know that we can give staff like do X, Y, and Z and work on that for the next year because again, things change and all of a sudden Z made sense today, but it doesn't make sense in a month from now. But so I feel like there's a level at which we can provide direction that is enough for them to work on, but also gives them some flexibility to adjust to the real environment that we're all going to be in or are in right now. So I don't know if that helps the discussion, but that's kind of, I think, what we're all thinking about through this discussion.
Right. So, we've talked about at the last meeting, the successful strategic planning. Sorry, somebody just rang my doorbell. I have no idea who it is. Successful strategic planning really requires setting both short and longer term strategic priorities and then assessing emerging issues that could impact the organization, the community, and so forth. And I don't know that we need to go through all of that again. You all understand that. Some of the discussion we talked about last time was that whether you all decide to be proactive in addressing some of these policies or reactive regarding future development and redevelopment opportunities. And we listed some examples of that in the report. The goals that were derived from the last discussion really kind of came down to three primary goals. Maintain and continue to establish a diverse community with a high quality of life. And ideally, we are able to identify a top two priorities in order to pursue addressing that goal and pursuing desirable outcomes. The second goal, not in priority order, was encourage a variety of housing options with some priority examples listed. And then the third was support a healthy business district and building jobs in a tax base in the village while creating sustainable development opportunities. And so just starting out to, not in priority order, but putting the first goal out for discussion, maintain and continue to establish a diverse community with a high quality of life. There were three priorities that came through discussion during that meeting. And One was residents are able to interact, share, and learn from each other. And the action items that were discussed, one, for example, undertake equity, diversity, and inclusion training and implement recommendations. And the second, under that particular priority, was provide and improve public spaces and infrastructure throughout the village. And any discussion about that particular priority? Where do you think it rests? Do you think it's a strong priority, or do you want to have the discussion first, and then once we get through all of the priorities, come back and decide on developing a sense of priority here, or a sense of urgency with which priorities?
Trustee Carpenter.
So, I think with and Rebecca, maybe you can help kind of chime in, but with the, a large public infrastructure project, the AMI project, was put on hold due to COVID. And we do have some long-term plans for what I think is the most important public infrastructure program or process plan, the fixing of the sewers in the southeast quadrant of the village. I don't know, maybe Rebecca, you could tell us how that has been impacted with COVID, because I feel like, kind of Wes touched on it too, but I feel like everything is needs to be like an asterisk. It's important, but, and, I don't know, Rebecca, maybe you can kind of talk to that, because we've just had to shift our priorities with everything. Nothing is the same as it was. I mean, honestly, even on from March 12th to March 13th, March 13th
Right.
was the date schools were canceled, and, everything unraveled. And I would be surprised if come September, we're in a better place. I mean, I think we're going to be in this tough situation until we have a real solid vaccine, which they're saying is January. So, I feel like everything needs to have an asterisk next to it, but I don't know, Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on how we've sort of shifted focus with some of the public infrastructure?
So for AMI, we deferred implementation for a year because that literally required going into every residence and property here in the village. So obviously with social distancing things, that would not be appropriate. So we've shifted that, and we're tentatively planning on implementation next spring. So that's 1 year delayed. With the Southeast Sewer Project, we were about a month or two delayed, but that was more on our part, and because we took some time to further evaluate consultants and process. But we're in process of starting the design of that project with Strand, and so we're looking to get more information on that later this year. To your point, Trustee Carpenter, most things that we do, I wish as you said it crystallized it so much for me, because March seems like an eternity ago, as I'm sure it all does to all of you. We were halfway through this process, and so with the strategic planning process accounted for 2 meetings as collectively as a group. And I think, as we leave the discussion tonight, I think more than anything, it's important that we have some common or majority level of understanding about how we are going to proceed. Because I find sometimes as we work on projects, sometimes it's just acknowledging the beginning or having some level of agreement on the fact that maybe some of these things aren't in the top priorities of the board and the CDA at this time. Maybe it's seeking some other type of direction. And I know that Chair Hammond has, we've talked about, competing priorities and what the pulse in the community is now. And that's why we look to you as a board and as a CDA, as our leadership, really to weigh in on how that should be focused. In the immediate, future, we will have the expiration of TID number 1, and we will need to make a decision before the end of this year whether or not we should extend the revenue period of that tax increment district for a 1-year time period for purposes of affordable housing as defined by statute. So that is action that we will need to see from both groups. But other than that, we want to hear from you, from both groups, in terms of what they believe should be our focus to lean into, with the understanding that it could change.
Was someone going to say something?
Can I jump
Yes.
in?
Sure.
So just to one question, just drilling down on one of the sample action items. When we say undertake equity, diversity, and inclusion training and implement recommendations, can you give me a little bit of an illustration as to what that means? Does that mean village staff? Does that mean offering the training broadly publicly and finding recommendations from that? Who are we targeting with that training, and who's coming up with the recommendations?
My recollection was it was all of the above. It was kind of multiple areas of almost a kind of a cross-cutting theme for all priorities in pursuing that. But the village administrator may have some thoughts and what's happened since then.
Can I just
your recommendation?
I mean,
Recollection.
I agree. Let me just comment on that, because I think I agree, Trustee Warren. You know, that one is a challenging one to me, because it's really for the whole village. You know, it's a bit beyond the CDA's scope, really. It was made at the meeting we wanted. I think Baker Tilly wanted to capture it, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's within our purview to do that. So I'm a bit sort of wanting to put that one. It's actually a higher level to me than sort of what we're talking about here, and I don't want to get caught up in the implementation of that, because again, I don't see that as a, you know, at that level. I guess I'm not viewing that as a CDA role. And then another thing on the discussion for this, I'm trying to think about how best to get us through this. And I feel like maybe it would be good if we ran through the priorities in each one of the 3 goals, and just Baker Tilly just lays them out for us, and we all absorb those for a minute, and then let's go back then to the A1 and have a conversation about that under this new world that we're living in, to see if is anything in there relevant to our current world that we really think is a top priority. Then go to the housing, because I think within the housing there are some things that are relevant that we're still going to want to work on, particularly to Trustee Carpenter's point, if we can provide some assistance to people there. And then I do think there are some within the you know, the development healthy business district aspect in the current world that we can provide direction to the staff to work on. So if anybody, unless anybody objects, I'd like to do that. Just put all the priorities on the table in the 3 big groups, and then let's come back and work the 3 chunks and see if we can come to some conclusion on that. Otherwise, I feel like, again, there's so many moving parts, as Trustee Carpenter said, that, and we may end up tonight with, you know, saying this is all secondary. I think that's an acceptable answer. You know, this is not, we don't want staff working on any of these things at this point. They really need to be focused elsewhere. I think that's a fair answer as well to this. But to work through this, I think we want to kind of take it top down and then dig into those. Okay. Did someone else was someone else trying to raise their hand that I might have missed? Okay. So Art, would you be able to maybe kind of walk us, take us through those quickly?
And Peter, I agree. I think that discussion on the diversity and equity issues, that was more of the board of trustees focused issue, as opposed to specific to you all.
Okay.
So the next priority that was discussed was regulatory ordinance zoning obstacles to building a diverse community are identified and removed. And That was some examples related to that priority were updating the zoning code with respect to the built environment and historical assets, balancing the needs of owner-occupied and renter-occupied households, review and develop policies to support full life cycle living, and prevent housing displacement as a part of future development. And if you do need any clarification or I've stated it incorrectly from what you remember, please let me know as we go along here.
Can you explain prevent housing displacement,
Yes.
please? Could you explain prevent housing displacement?
The context, I think, was based on my notes, and what I remember was as development occurs, relocating parts of neighborhoods or housing. But Michaela, do you remember?
Part of that conversation is making sure that you've got a variety of housing at different income and attainability levels, so that there is a variety of it kind of, in addition to the life cycle housing, it's also making sure that you're not, if development or redevelopment occurs, you're not removing housing options for certain individuals that were staying there. So it's more focused on the residents being able to stay. If they're at a certain area, that's what they can afford. If there's redevelopment of that property, that they can still come back to it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next priority was stakeholders have the necessary, need to have the necessary data, information on critical aspects of Shorewood's composition to make informed decisions. And an example that was brought up, to need to update and maintain business occupancy database to monitor vacancy rates, business types, and ownership characteristics of commercial tenants. All right. The next goal identified was
I'm sorry, I have
encourage.
another question. Is that something the bid would do?
A business improvement district?
Yeah.
It could be. I know Bart.
Yep.
Bart had brought up the idea that the staff might be able to monitor that, but Bart, what's your recollection of that?
Yeah, the conversation started with that the prior planning director did maintain a database, but it wasn't necessarily kept up or accurate. And so when I came in, I stopped administering that simply because I didn't have the confidence that it was reporting accurately. So to your point, the bid could monitor that for us, but it was maintained through occupancy permits. So my department had been doing that. And so some CDA members and perhaps board members got used to receiving a report that had particular vacancy rates reported, but I didn't have confidence in those numbers. So the concept with this particular priority would be, if that's something that the board wants staff or whoever to be working on, something we could do. Similarly, there's other, I just wanted to clarify, there's other things that we could be doing within these. These are just things that we've noted in the conversation. So if there's other aspects of whether it's a market study or other things that you want within these particular priorities, feel free to, acknowledge those. But with respect to this one, it was largely based on the prior database and whether or not you wanted staff to take more effort into bringing that back. So.
We're not we're going to talk about get all of them and then comment. We're not commenting as we go. Is that right?
If you have a clarification question.
Well, I was going to add, I think that there's other types of data that would be useful, like sales data, rents per square foot, land values. There's a lot of that type of data in the business district that I think would be useful to be keeping track of.
Okay. Next goal, encourage a variety of housing options One of the priorities would be supporting the current housing stock in a variety of ways. Review and establish a neighborhood home loan program was one idea. Continue code enforcement to preserve quality housing stock, and then work with homeowners to modernize aging properties. You're
I
doing
think what
some of that now.
Yeah, and just to add, I think, and again, it's sort of throughout this, the whole question of the code, the zoning
Yeah.
code and the like. I think that that's probably an element here too, reviewing the code to ensure, there are incentives in place for people, for us for the village to get the desired activity that you want out of that. So again, I feel like code work is throughout all of these objectives.
Peter, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Sorry. I know I knew this at one time, and I think I'm right on this, but just to confirm, the neighborhood home loan program is assistance with down payments on purchase of homes.
No, I think that Bart can, I believe that was, yeah, go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, there were three aspects. There was the down payment assistance aspect. There was also a duplex conversion aspect where we incentivized people to turn a duplex into a single family house. And then the most utilized one was a loan program to add additional living space. So renovating an attic kind of situation. So that was the most utilized. So those are the three main aspects of what that program had been doing.
Thank you. Now I remember. Yeah, got it.
Trustee Carpenter.
One other thing in connection kind of to the zoning is maybe re-looking at how we reassess after residents improve their home. Because, somebody does a project, we want to incentivize someone to do a project on their home and to, do an update, whether it's a new kitchen or whatever it may be. But then, they immediately are reassessed for any of those improvements. And I think that, and I've heard from residents that it doesn't really feel like it's, there's not an incentive to then make those updates when, as soon as you close your permit, you're being reassessed for any changes you've made to your property.
And I think if I could just add to this particular goal, I think, this is certainly one where there's a lot of conversation about the impacts of COVID regarding the rights of tenants, the rights of owners. And I think this is one in particular where when you're looking at financing and public participation, this could be some, what are we dealing with as opposed to what are we planning for? So I just want to point that out, that as we're not, again, working in a vacuum. This one is your ideals, but also understanding the current reality could be different and is different than perhaps what we thought 4 months ago.
Okay. Next priority, criteria and programs for new housing stock should be established. That would include increasing mixed income housing, increasing affordable senior citizen accessible housing, and creating life cycle attainable housing options, or increasing the availability of that. Any clarification questions? Okay. Next priority under housing options is regulatory ordinance zoning policies should support a variety of housing options. And sample or examples of action items might include updating the zoning code with respect to housing types, increasing mixed income housing in the codes, and advocate for exclusionary inclusionary zoning. And then
I'm sorry, can you give an example of advocate for inclusionary zoning?
I can explain that if it's helpful. Inclusionary zoning is a requirement that if a development were to take place, a certain number of those units would have to be for a certain type of resident. So whether it's an affordable at a certain percentage, the state removed that as a tool maybe 3 or 4 years ago. They built it into the state statute that local municipalities could not do that. In my time here, I've heard various board members suggest that we should do that. We can do that if it's part of a TIF district, because at that point we're part of the development agreement. So within any sort of TIF housing deal, we could require that locally ourselves, but we could not require it if someone came in and did it by themselves. So the city of Milwaukee and other cities have advocated that that be removed from state statute. So it's just something that's come up that possibly we could, take in conversation.
So if we decided to extend the TIF for housing, this would be one thing, sample action item number 3, we could use it there. Is that correct?
Correct. If we extend that TIF, that money would be set aside for a specific program. If the board adopted the program that said it could only be used for affordable housing, we could make it available for whatever developer was developing it, with the caveat that it needed to be used for that purpose. So when we participate in the deals, we can require that. The general inclusionary zoning discussion is more so when the market is working by itself, local municipalities cannot require that. So if we control that or we're part of the deal, we can always require it. If we're not, right now, we can't make someone build affordable units.
Thank you.
Okay.
okay.
Desti, did you have a comment?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
can I circle back to the criteria for new housing stock for a minute? I was thinking a little bit about that, and I'd like to make sure that future housing stock is privately owned, is individually owned properties, not business entities. I think we're at a saturation point right now with regards to apartments and rental units, where we have to get back to basics and allow individuals to own these units. So moving forward, I think there's more value to the village to allow a developer to come in and build condominiums versus apartment buildings. I think those owners are going to put down roots in the community and have a stake at what goes on in the community. And individually, those units have a higher value in the tax rolls than privately owned buildings with individual rental units. So I think that would be a real important step in looking at any new housing stock that might go and be considered in the village. And that also allows involvement in inclusionary zoning. If the developer were involved in a project like that, and the village did look at a TIF to help with that sort of a development, then they would have some say in what goes in and how it goes in. So everybody wins. You can even look at density too. If you included higher density in a project like that with more affordable housing, it makes more sense for them to put together a larger scale project.
Thanks, Dusty.
Okay. All right, the next goal, support a healthy business district and build jobs and tax base in the village while creating sustainable development opportunities. One priority would be to improve or continue support for existing businesses. And that would include identify and develop programs to assist existing businesses, update zoning code with respect to commercial uses and zones, and increase the daytime population to increase business interactions during the daylight hours. Any clarifications or thoughts on that?
Just on that third item, I guess, to me, these, I guess to some degree, I'd want the action items to be actionable and, increase daytime population. To me, I guess it's more, I don't know, establish policies or incentives or actions that would increase daytime population. What's the action we're going to take to try and drive that? We'd all love to have increased daytime population, but to me, the question is, what do you do to try and drive that? What can we work on to make that happen?
Yeah,
The conversation, part of the conversation I remember was maybe encouraging or increasing number of offices or destination attractions that were not high in density, but would provide more people for patronizing, some of the commercial establishments during lunch time and those kinds of things, and creating more, walkable, busyness during the daytime was part of the discussion I remember hearing.
Okay.
Peter?
Wesley? Yeah.
Yeah, just to build on Peter's point, I mean, increased daytime population, I think it's a great idea, and it's certainly something that it's certainly an enviable, it's certainly a good goal for the village. I just feel like it's more of a priority than a sample action item. I think that, if we I feel like that would kind of explode as something we're doing. I think if we put parameters around it as Peter's recommended, I think it becomes a much more actionable item.
Right. And again, that's just thinking about it. That's another COVID-19 question. Do we really want to be increasing daytime population? And again, who knows the timing? 6 months from now, maybe. But again, it's in here because we talked about it in that completely different world that we lived in on the 12th, just to make sure we captured it. But again, to Jessica's point earlier, that's to me a perfect example of, is that it's a long-term priority of, I think, ideally, but where does it fall? I'm not sure. So.
Okay, next priority, identified the village's commercial tax base to be increased. Obviously, that helps to create a longer term sustainability for the village with new and additional revenues to help support services to the citizens. And that was kind of the thought behind that. Some of the action items: pursue targeted economic development strategies, pursue investments, projects, and initiatives that increase visitor and destination attractions, recruit and pursue investments that maintain and create quality, well-compensated jobs, establish programs and policies to attract support new potential Shorewood businesses, proactively identify sites for development and redevelopment instead of just sitting back and letting the market dictate that. Establish TIF policies and procedures. Proactively identify and attract new and preferred business types to Shorewood. Update zoning code with respect to commercial uses and zones, and establish policies and actions to increase the daytime population again.
Trustee Warren, is his
Trustee
hand
Warren.
raised? Is that old?
Yeah.
Or is,
I couldn't tell.
No, my hand has been raised. No, my hand, I'll lower my hand.
Okay, all right.
Did somebody have a clarification or question, or did I miss that?
I don't think so.
Nope. Okay. And then another priority was vibrancy. Some examples of action items: establish programs and policies to help drive increased business district vibrancy. Again, increased daytime population, the very general comment. Establish programs and policies to attract, support new and potential Shorewood businesses. Proactively identify sites for development and redevelopment. Establish policies and actions to increase daytime population, and define and encourage population growth.
So obviously lots of crossover and duplication, but
Yeah.
you know, some of these apply to multiple goals and objectives. Does anybody have any questions on that one? So let me offer something out for purposes of, again, to me, this is challenging. This would be a challenging conversation in a regular world. And in this world, it's just much more challenging, but I'm curious for the groups. It seems to me like at this point in time, for the CDA, our focus should be on supporting the existing businesses and doing everything we can to help them. And I think it should also, so that to me is the economic development one. And then within the housing, I feel like it's focusing on the current housing stock and supporting that to make sure our current residents and the people that are here have what they need in this current environment. And then I feel like there's some element of a third one might be sort of, I feel like there's maybe targeted opportunities for possible development that does include senior housing or affordable housing, because we just know we hear that. I know the board hears that every day as a priority, and I think I think that is still consistent in this current environment. So those to me are, as I think about it, and maybe to try to push this conversation forward, I would throw those three on the table as three main headings of things we would want to work on. That the whole development question, I think it's hard to wrap our heads around that, other than, again, this really pointed, targeted concept. But to me, we need to just help current Shorewood survive through this. And so what can we as a CDA do? I feel like it's kind of those three things. So I put that out to the group for a response to that. Yes,
Peter?
sorry, Trustee Warren, yes.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to, apologies, I keep chiming in, but I wanted
You're on my second page, so I don't always see you, sorry.
No, I wanted to second you. I think that, unfortunately, COVID-19 has put us on the defensive here, and I think we need to aim our resources at supporting existing housing stock and existing business. I love some of the things in here, and I want to pursue them as soon as we can, but that just might not be feasible from a pragmatic standpoint over the course of the next year. I think that there are things that we can opportunistically work on while we're in the midst of this pandemic. I like removing obstacles to building a diverse community. I think that we can update the zoning code, for instance.
Yep.
I think we can review and develop policy for full life cycle housing. But some of the bigger things, like trying to increase the daytime population, some of the huge kind of bites that we would take, I'm not so sure we can accomplish that while supporting our existing businesses and housing stock. So I think that we just have to be careful in terms of how you approach this. And again, maybe we look at it as these top goals or something that are almost like the next 1 to 4 years, where for the next year we focus on supporting what we have going, and hopefully we're on the other side at the end of that year and we start to kind of enumerate other kind of more proactive approaches. But long story short, I second what you're saying, Peter.
Yes, Trustee Menta?
I'm not sure what, we can do to support. I mean, we gave the emergency grants. So on the business side, I mean, I'm just not sure what we could really do. I mean, on the housing side, there's a lot of discussion about the zoning code all through this. I mean, something we can do you know, that isn't like money, is to start like granny units and consideration of, I know that was talked about, like small house, what are those called, tiny houses or
Tiny
granny
house, yeah.
in the backyard, you know, to maybe facilitate families being able to live together. But, you know, like even the code enforcement issue, you know, like if we're supporting housing, are we supporting housing stock, or are we supporting the people living in the housing? Because, you know, when code enforcement comes and says, you got to replace that roof, I mean, that's $10,000 to people who may have trouble making their taxes that year. So, you know, I'm not sure, like, what are we talking about specifically when we say support existing housing? I'm not sure. You know, it kind of depends on what we mean when we say that.
Well, again, for that, I mean, I think, you know, the one, I mean, we do have, I mean, from a money perspective, so we do have the neighborhood loan program potential for that. You know, again, we have TID1 closing, you know, there could be funds there, granted that we won't have that for a while, but we would need some planning, obviously leading up to that, to be able to have programs in place to be able to use that. So I guess those are two of maybe some specifics that I was thinking of. And then I don't know, I would maybe throw this to Bart. I mean, that to me is where I'm not struggling, but I keep thinking about is, you know, where is enough direction to staff so that staff can then has enough direction to go and take that on. Because, you know, we're not necessarily experts on the details and the nuts and bolts of what we could do. Bart obviously has extensive experience. He knows people, you know, or his team and all the staff, if that's our objective, that they come back and say, okay, here, we can do the neighborhood loan, we can do, you know, TID1, and here's 3 other things that we've seen other communities do or that we can do. And so here's the game plan with respect to achieving that priority that the CDA and village board have given you. So Bart, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think Trustee Carpenter might have mentioned this earlier in the conversation. The neighborhood loan program, I believe, used to allow for people to fix non-code compliant issues. That aspect was removed because it was felt perhaps that people were being rewarded for not updating their house. You know, so when they got the letter that said they needed to put a new roof on or fix their fascia, et cetera, we used to offer, you know, loan funds to do that. And I don't know when that exactly was removed, but at the time the board, I believe it must have been the board, you know, took that away with the belief that it was rewarding people for being delinquent on those updates. You know, if you got a letter, then all of a sudden you qualified, but if you did it by yourself, you didn't qualify. So there's a discussion kind of on the financial aspect. If the goal, to Trustee Amenta's point, is to update the stock as opposed to, you know, support the residents, that's a question that would need to be answered. So we do have an aging housing stock. I mean, I'm the department that administers that on a daily basis. My code enforcement inspector comes to me with you know, new photos of a new project that he wasn't expecting to see on his drive to his, you know, to his permit inspection. So, I mean, today there was one where the fascia was falling off. That was new to him. These things happen. We would hope that homeowners are, you know, keeping track of that, but sometimes they're simply not. So the code enforcement thing is always going to be a kind of a lose-lose from my perspective, because if we don't do it, you're going to have increased, you know, problems. When we do it, you know, we're the bad guy. So it really is kind of a nuanced conversation. With respect to the neighborhood loan program in general, there was a lot of discussion. I'm not sure if it was in this meeting or in the housing meetings where there was a desire to reposition that program to allow for energy efficiency. You know, so we have an aging housing stock that could benefit from whether it's new windows or insulation or things like that. So as opposed to financing a duplex conversion, which, you know, might displace residents who are living there, to the point of one of the previous priorities, we could reposition that program to support existing residents to lower their heating bills, to update the housing stock. So I hear a lot of things in these conversations that I'm happy to, you know, take and run with and bring them back to the CDA and board as time permits. So if the desire that I'm currently hearing, and once again, we're probably not to the point of consensus on anything, if what I'm hearing is, you know, supporting existing housing stock and existing residents, existing businesses, that gives enough direction for me to understand, you know, where my time and effort should be spent. Long rambling answer to tell you.
No, that's helpful. Yeah.
I'm listening is what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
it's a good conversation.
I mean, obviously the other tool we have, well, it's, you know, because Trustee Amenta had mentioned that how do we help businesses as well. I mean, we do have the business loan program that is, you know, on hold right now. We've had some conversations about how to restart that, but again, that's, you know, there are funds available there to potentially put to use, but it's going to take some time and work to build out that program. So that to me is sort of a really specific, you know, if we're telling staff, look, we really want to get that program back up and running, the needs of the businesses are just paramount here. We've got funds sitting there not being used. Please go figure that out and come back to us with how we can get that program back up and running right away. All right, I don't know, did I just kill the whole conversation by throwing out my my proposal?
Peter, this is
Yes.
Kathy Jokerbrand.
Yes, Kathy.
I wonder if one of the most important things we need to decide is what we're going to do with this TIF. It's July now, and a decision has to be made by the end of the year. How much discussion do we need to move forward with what we're going to do with that TIF? Is that something we should iron out tonight?
I think it should, well, again, my quick thoughts, and then staff, the smarter people than me will chime in as well. I think it needs to be somewhere on the top priorities. It's going to require some work, I think, on the part of staff and this. My thought is staff and the CDA are sort of working to come up with a recommendation to the board about what that would look like. And so we'd obviously need to do that sooner rather than later. And your right, time is running out. So I don't know, Bart and Becca, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the conversation needs to happen soon. In terms of questions that need to be answered, whether it's tonight or at a future meeting, I don't think we can do it within tonight's conversation, quite honestly. But, you know, do we want to do it? If there's consensus on doing it, there's a lot of options in doing it. If we do it, what kind of program do we want to develop? Do we want to develop a program that would support the attraction of new affordable units? Or to the point of the previous conversation, do we want to build a program that supports existing residents who would qualify for improvements either to their house or to an existing apartment building or things like that? So there's a lot of questions in succession that need to be answered in terms of having me at least bring you back some options. Once again, I'm here to listen. So if there is a desire on behalf of the board to consider extending that, I think that's something that needs to be laid out first. And then if we do extend it, what is the general goal? Is it to fill a new housing type, support existing residents, you know, attract a mixed use project with inclusive units, things like that? So there are a lot of options with that program. It would be a lot of money. I think it's up to $2 million perhaps in that increment. I don't believe we have to use the full amount for it. So perhaps we reserve a portion of it. But whether that's on tonight's conversation or a future CDA meeting, it needs to happen, I would say, within the next, 6 months, so that by the end of the year, we're prepared to move forward with it.
And the other option is we close it out and there's more property taxpayer relief sooner. Is that correct?
Correct. If you close it out, that money, goes back to each of the taxing jurisdictions. So the school district, the county, the village, MATC, right? So we would have the opportunity to capture those funds to do something specific and shoreward. If there's no consensus on what to do with it, it would go back into those taxing jurisdictions.
I see you, Wesley. Let me just make one quick comment. For purposes of, I feel like I don't have enough, I'm not sure anybody in this room has enough information. I think we need an education first about it. So, maybe the CDA with, Bart helping us and leading us, the CDA can put together, again, kind of, this is what it looks like, this is what it could do, this is, SWOT analysis, pros and cons, and then come to the village board as quickly as possible to say, okay, here's what it looks like, here's what we can do, here's the impacts, here's what other communities have done, pitfalls, all those things. Because again, we need more information before anybody, I think, can make a decision. So I feel like that's a really concrete, specific direction we could give to staff to say, look, by September, we need to have a meeting where the CDA is presenting at one of the village board meetings on this whole concept and what it looks like, so that, I would need to make that to the CDA, and we would also need to make that to the village board, so we can say, yes, we want to proceed, or no, we don't. And then to me, if we say the yes, then I agree the next step is, what does it look like? What are we doing with the proceeds? And agreeing on that. So again, Wesley, you had a comment.
Peter, you keep stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. And I was also going to say, to Kathy's point, I do think that I view this, what we do with TIF number 1, as kind of, it's already I view it as kind of already a priority. So I think the CDA is already going to be working on that, kind of, Peter, to your point. So I view this as kind of in addition to, not in lieu of that. I would expect the CDA to come back with recommendations around that, in addition to this work. So just agreeing with you, Peter.
Okay.
If I could just add, I think that's one of the action items, and ultimately in your toolbox, assuming you get consensus on how, going back on using, so perhaps it's using TID could be a tool and an outcome, but it goes back to, I think, Bart, you had asked a question, is it time to have a discussion on, is it existing stock or new stock? And maybe, that's part of the conversation of kind of stepping back and say what's realistic. And then from there you can pursue, we have potential opportunities and funds available to implement those programs or those goals.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I get, our original thought was that we would use it for affordable housing, to develop and provide new affordable housing. But again, in this current environment, maybe that's not, maybe it is actually, to Trustee Carpenter's point, no, it's to use it to help existing. I don't know. I mean, I think that's sort of one of the fundamental questions we're going to have to answer.
Can I make a suggestion too? When at our last board meeting, we had to approve how we wanted to allocate our CDBG funds, and that we were not going to use them specifically within the village, but they were going to go to the county, I think, for sort of a pooled program. But as part of doing that, there were a list of housing, affordable housing types of things that we needed to do, some of them. And one of them was to contact the Milwaukee Fair Housing Council. And I actually looked on their website, and they will come and like do an evaluation and, make recommendations on zoning or specific sites, or how, really give us some specific, it seemed like they would give us some specific advice on how we could bring more affordable housing to Shorewood. So I just want to throw that out there. I think it'd be worth talking to them and seeing if we can get, the purpose of keeping the TIF increment is for affordable housing. And, I'm a little concerned if we use it like to give it to existing apartment owners to make improvements, then they'll raise rents. So that's not really helping us in affordable housing. So I think it's worth contacting the Fair Housing Council and seeing what kind of resources they could help us out with.
And we have used them in the past. In my 3 years, I've used them twice for other purposes, so they're happy to help us out with that. Once again, I'm sure that'd be a great resource for us to tap into, so definitely we'll do that.
This may be a silly question, but just a point of information for myself. To Dusty's point about wanting to get owner-occupied condos, can you have condos be affordable housing?
I could take a stab at, I mean, it's really comes down to what they can afford to acquire. So part of it is what the market is to, part of it is what the market takes to build that and sell it. And often in some cases, what you'll see is if it's a down payment assistance, or you're writing down that initial acquisition price so that it is affordable to the first time home buyer. So first time home buyer program or down payment assistance, there's different programs. But ultimately what you're trying to do is write down what the acquisition price is, if it's above, or if the market is greater than what is affordable at different income levels, then you're trying to reduce that to what a monthly mortgage payment is that's affordable, if it's 30% of your rent, or in whatever the metrics, or excuse me, 30% of your income, making sure it's affordable. And so that's what some communities have implemented, is trying to make ownership more affordable, and that's reducing the upfront cost. And there's different strategies you can do to achieve that.
And so is there nothing in it for the developer?
There's always something in it for the developer.
That's a loaded question, right? I mean, someone essentially, the assistance is going. I mean, the homeowner. That's where you have the devil's in the details. But the idea is that the affordability is for the. I mean, and that's what you have to make sure is that the affordability is not going to the developer, but it's going to the resident as the buyer, and able to afford it. So it's writing down the cost to make the developer build it, but the goal is that it's the buyer that's getting the benefit.
Thank you.
All right, so Art, where do you think this puts us?
Well, Chair Hammond, you brought up kind of 3 identified areas: supporting existing businesses, housing, having a focus on current housing stock, and then the third, I think, was kind of specific policy development related to, and I didn't get the whole comment, but related to those, supporting those areas, like as in continuing the public infrastructure as available and as needed. Do you want to go through and kind of narrow down the 3 broad goals? That's not different than the 3 broad goals which you brought up, and we could narrow down some of the possible actions as next steps to consider this next year as a part of your 3 goals that you brought up. Is that what you were thinking?
Yep, to be honest, that's kind of where my mind goes blank, because I'm not sure how to do that.
That third item, can you
Yeah,
summarize that again for me?
The third item was just affordable housing. It is a priority for the village. It's
Okay,
a priority for the board. It's a priority for everybody, and I just don't want to lose sight of it. And again, to Trustee Amenta's point, and maybe that third one is just this. I don't know what staff feels, but the TID extension question, I feel like there's a lot of work involved in that. That staff is. I mean, obviously the CDA is going to have to undertake a lot of that, but I feel like a lot of it's going to fall to staff too. And I understand Trustee Warren's point that that's going to have to happen, but given all the other demands on staff time, I feel like we need to put it on this list specifically. And again, Bart, I would maybe look to you to get your thoughts on that one. If you think it's appropriate here, or is it something else?
No, I think it's clear direction that we need to work on it, just because there's a deadline with it. And once again, maybe the what is not identified tonight. Maybe it's simply realizing that that is one of the major things that I will be tasked with doing, and then realizing that that then impacts other things that I could or could not be doing, i.e. zoning code updates. So what I'm looking for selfishly in the conversation, you know, as I'm listening, is prioritizing what I'm hearing, understanding that we all want to do all of it, but then the next time someone, you know, suggests, why don't we have 8 accessory dwelling units? At least I would say, well, the CDA and the board wanted me to work on affordable housing. They wanted me to work on a TIF extension. It's not that that's not important, but based on tonight's conversation, we all agreed that these other things were the priority. And so what I'm hearing definitely is that we want to have the conversation on TID 1 extension. We might not know what that looks like yet. We probably want to have a very detailed conversation to make sure that it is hitting goals that we have. In terms of that one, that's a clear win for me tonight. I mean, I think I probably knew that already, but at least acknowledging from this group that that will take a lot of work, and then prioritizing things, you know, after that at least sets the bar for expectations on what it is that we can bring back to you. So that one to me, quite honestly, is quite clear if that is the consensus of the group. What's less clear right now is, you know, how we would support existing businesses or current housing stock. I can bring back ideas for that as well. But just, there are, you know, probably 30 other things that were presented tonight. I don't want to lose track of those just because someone didn't say it, that they all get lost.
Yes.
So this would be my, I guess, plug to say, you know, make sure that you're looking at this list and identifying what it is that we're doing and making sure that you're capturing that in your comments. Because if for some reason someone really does want a market study on a certain type of thing, that's where I would need to hear it tonight. If I don't hear it tonight, it likely will not get incorporated into any sort of to-do list anytime soon.
Well, I don't want to forget about seniors and being able to stay in Shorewood. And I know there was discussion of, I want like a 1-story ranch, you know, because I want to live in a house and have a yard, but I don't want to have to go upstairs. And I mean, we're not, you know, we're just not going to have that in Shorewood. But I mean, if we can start thinking about options other than, you know, $4,000 a month apartments, that most people who've already paid off their house are not interested in paying those kind of rents. But if we had, you know, if we did have, there's actually a lot of seniors in, is it the Eastwood condos? So, I mean, I think that's a really successful development. And there's, I mean, Dusty can probably say there's the vacancies in there get snapped up really quickly. And a lot of people move, you know, sell their house, but want to stay in Shorewood and move there. So I don't want to forget about that. And and also the, disability rights people have been advocating for a long time. And I don't want to forget about their, you know, housing for adult children or just for people with disabilities in general. Also because Shorewood, because we are, you know, we do have better than average public transportation. So we have, you know, things that for someone who's disabled, they can be in a reasonably, you know, a mixed suburban urban area, but you know, they can walk to Metro Market to do their grocery shopping. I mean, for people with disabilities, there's Shorewood is a real niche and an advantageous place. So I don't want to forget about both of those constituencies.
Arthur?
I'd also like to put on the list, you know, improving the energy efficiency of homes.
Yes.
You know, potentially utilizing solar, and then also examining where the village is at with their lead water service lines. I know that's been an issue in the past. I'm fairly new to the board, but I'd love to hear where the village is at with those lines, and maybe there's something we can do there.
Yeah, and actually sorry, that's a great point. I think maybe some of that got lost because energy efficiency did come up in the surveys in a lot of other areas. And I agree. I think it's, again, to me, that is, you know, supporting the current housing stock. I think both of those items, the lead water question and the energy efficiency are to me, subcomponents of the current housing stock being supported. So, you know, that's kind of maybe the direction Bart's looking for is, you know, are those the key areas we're asking him to look at?
Yeah. Definitely just wanted to get that out there. I agree with everything else though, but I wanted to make sure that that point was noted, or those
And then,
topics were noted.
David, I just out of curiosity on your 2 points, do you see those as current urgent priorities now, or are you saying we need to keep them on the list so that long term, and again, as we get back to whatever the future looks like, that we engage those projects at some point in the future? I guess it's more of a timing question for you. When?
Well, what would be more, you know, what, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I really think that COVID, you know, I mean, is going to be done in, you know, 9 months or 18 months. I mean,
Right.
you know, it could be, who knows? I mean, who knows if there's a vaccine or if it works, or I don't know. I mean, I don't really think like, oh, there's going to be some date and we're all going to get the vaccine and it's going to be over, you know? So I don't, yeah, so I don't know. So what, so I'm sorry, what would be?
Well, no, I think you're bringing up the exact, because right, are we in a retrenching mode here? Sort of, we need, I think Wesley said it too, we're kind of on the defensive here. And so, you know, those are all great programs. Are we ready to take that on now to try to build that out? Or are we really saying, look, it's on the list and we're thinking about it longer term, but for purposes of right now with where we are in this environment, sort of the whole concept of anything new in that area, we just can't think about now? Or are you saying, no, it needs to be part of the now thinking?
Well, I mean, if we're going to take the entire 2 million, I mean, that's a lot of money, you know. I don't think we're going to buy our own, you know, project. I mean, it's going to be like a 10 or 20% or some kind of, you know, something like the state does with, you know, something to make it easier for someone to come in and do it. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, in a way, before we decide on an amount, I think we need to like have some idea of what we got to do. I think we're going to have to do something new with that. You know, I mean, I don't know what else we could do to like offer it to existing homes.
No, okay, I'm sorry. So, right, so you're seeing those as sort of subcomponents of whether we decide to extend the TID or not. And with those funds, what are we, okay, perfect.
Which I think we should, because, you know, when are we going to have an opportunity?
Right.
I mean, I guess in 2024, you know, there will be opportunities as the other TIDs close, but those are not anywhere near that much an increment.
No, I'm sorry, I missed the connection. You were saying that was part of we should contemplate it. So I would agree with you. That will be, will be contemplated as we go down the TID extension question. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Wesley,
Chair
did you have yes.
Chair Hammond, President Rozek has her hand raised.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes. Oh, you're muted. Oh.
I'm not sure why it's not unmuting.
I can't unmute certain options anymore. I don't know if something changed there either.
Can you hear
There
me?
you go.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not sure where the conversation went, but there was two things that I'm hearing. One is the extension of the TIF. Is that correct? And
I think that, yes, that's one of the items to be.
One of the items. And then the other,
whether
or not. And then the other is we have other programs, and can we reprogram that money for something else? Is that the two paths that we're talking about?
Yeah, we did discuss the neighborhood loan program and the business loan program as potential.
What are we going to do, and should we keep it the same? Okay.
There's many ways that was discussed.
Yeah, I don't know that there are just two paths. I mean, I think those are two options we talked about. Yep.
Those are the two that we've been talking about. Okay. So my thoughts on the two are, I talked with the county, and they are absolutely ecstatic if we would take advantage of the 1-year extension on the TIF for any type of affordable housing. They are 100% behind it, and they wanted to let me express that to everyone, that they really want us to do that. And I agree with them. So Shorewood is in my opinion, being president for 2 years, 2.5 years, and also being on the board for 2.5 years before that, not ready for affordable housing that is not senior oriented. That's my opinion. And so at this moment, I think that there's a big, long report and study done by our senior housing. Is it our, I can't remember who did it, but someone affiliated with us. Was it? Oh.
Novogradic, is that?
Yes, please. Yes. And I read every detail of it. I read every word, and I can't quote the statistics very well, but our senior population is growing by like 30% in 5 years or 10 years. I mean, it's just enormously growing. And so for that reason, if you just look at statistics, which most people do when they're looking at planning for growth, we would be smart to plan for a growth in senior population. And so whether that means affordable senior population, which is new construction, affordable units, or whether that means retrofitting existing homes so that people can stay there, which is grab bars, and there's all kinds of programs that around the country that we can research. But either of those would make 100% sense in my mind. And I'm sure after doing all these studies that the senior Novak and the senior center, and they're praying to God, we read this stuff and we see what's coming in front of us. There was a time when seniors were dying out and we had all these baby boomers, and then you adjust and you make housing choices for the future based on those statistics. But right now we've got to look at what's coming, and what's coming is we have an aging population that wants to stay in Shorewood. So I want to keep them in Shorewood. If you want to stay, I want you to be able to stay, and that's a welcoming neighborhood. So in that sense, I would say keep the affordable housing TIF. I mean, I'm all for closing out TIFs and getting back on the tax roll. But if we have one opportunity to utilize money where 1/4 of it comes from the village and the rest comes from other municipalities, take that money and run with it, because you'll never get that option again. So
yeah, I think that's, I agree. And I think that's, to me, that's part of the sort of the bigger project of the whole TID extension question that we will come back to the board with. Again, we'll do, as I just rough it out, the education part. And then when we all sort of agree, yes, we want to extend, then the big project is, what does that mean? How will the funds be used? And there's going to be we've already had, a list of 5 or 10 ways to use the money. And so then we'll have to narrow down there to say, okay, it's these 3 or whatever it is. So I agree with you that I think that is on the list with respect to the TID question.
excellent. And then as for respect to the neighborhood loan program, as for respect to, which is never utilized, I've been here for, 6 years, and Pete Petrie used to say, no one uses it. So, I mean, it's worse than a bank. When we're in crisis, maybe it's utilized, but we haven't been in crisis for years, and it's more stringent than a bank. So for that program, I think we should get rid of it. There's loan guarantee programs that I've been begging to look at that I think would be much more useful because you're partnering with a local bank. I also think that the money for duplex conversions is outdated. Had its purpose. Everything has its purpose, and I agreed with that purpose. But if you look at now, is that purpose still valid? I don't think so. So we have a lot of 80% of people get divorced. So we have a huge population of single family mothers, fathers who need places to stay. And if you ask and you look around, you have a pet, you go to the duplexes. And so you cannot, in our community, I feel, eliminate those any longer. That's why we put it on hold. So what can you do with that money? I agree with Trustee Ursink. I think that, sustainability is huge. I've looked around the country, and there are lots of programs that utilize the money for upgrading their sustainability features in their homes, which makes it cheaper for people to stay in Shorewood because their utility bills go down. So that's number one. It helps relieve, I mean, we have high taxes. So if you can lower utility bills, all for it, and save the environment. I also think that grab bars and anything we can do for our seniors to let them stay in their homes, I think that is where we're at right now. So we always have to adjust. You got to check out your programs. Never was it wrong. Never do I look back and go, that was the wrong thing to do. At every time there's a decision made because that's the times. But at this moment, I think the two biggest priorities are keeping seniors in their homes that want to stay, and allowing, you know, utility bills to go down by allowing green infrastructure. I just one more thing to share, and I'll shut up. The fire board that I sit on, they have astronomical bills going up because people are falling in their houses because they're getting older, and so we're grabbing from Peter for Paul, like, because people are
It's not
trying
my
to stay in
fault.
their homes. Is that? Can you hear me? Oh, so they're trying to stay in their homes and they're falling.
If everybody could just mute, I see a couple residents here that are unmuted, like Donna Pollock. If you could please mute your, thank you. Yep, that's great.
Thank you. So they're falling, and you know, and it's a huge expense and liability to our fire department to have to pick up people because it's a back injury. And so if we can do anything, and they're telling us to keep people from falling, keep people in their house, and you know, for modifications, we should be doing that because it's going to save us money on the long end, for back injuries of our fire department, for fire calls, for ambulances. I mean, we really have to think about where is the best investment of our dollars. And at this moment, we have an aging population. And so anything we can do to assist that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Trustee Carpenter.
I have some reservations in regards to continuing the TIF. I do recognize the opportunity, but after talking to thousands of residents, the number one issue, especially in relation to seniors, and especially in relation to seniors being able to stay in their homes, is property taxes. And so I would be interested to understand what that decrease in property taxes would be and would provide to residents. I don't remember it. I know I forget which document it's in. And understanding, I know it's not hugely significant, but you know, understanding ways that we can do both. You know, maybe there's some green infrastructure options that we can offer while reducing reducing property taxes, because that is, you know, it's not just an issue for seniors, it's an issue for everybody in our village. It's an increase year after year. And so, you know, there are a lot of residents who were sort of holding out for the TIF closures so that there would be some economic relief.
Not much. Is Mark on the line?
I don't think so.
Oh, because I just talked to him and it's like minuscule, beyond.
And again,
minuscule.
Trustee Carpenter, but it's an excellent point. And again, I feel like we keep coming back to this. This is the work we're going to have to do with respect to coming to a decision. And so this is all the stuff the CDA and Bart and the village staff will need to do to decide what is we do. And I agree, there's, you know, if the joint decision is to extend the TID, I think there's substantial community communication that will have to be done about that. You know, actually probably community communication before we even make the decision, you know, for people to participate in that. So we, you know, we get, we don't, as you know, come out after the fact and say we've made the decision, then nobody feels like they have a voice. So again, I think that, to me, that goes under the list of this TID extension project that we have on the list of how are we going to do that. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's an important point that we don't miss in this.
And
I feel like we need a big project plan. Yes.
If I could just ask Rebecca to please have Mark send it out to maybe our group or the trustees, because I got the information, it is beyond minuscule. So if people understood that of when we close it, what we're going to get.
Yeah, and I think the way it works is it's not a direct pass through to it goes to the village, and then you as the village board actually decide what to do with that money, I thought. I didn't think it was a direct sort of just goes right to the taxpayers. I thought there was an interim step where the board takes this, but we'll take that up. That'll be part of the education process that we'll do with respect to this TID extension discussion. Okay. So Bart, maybe I'm going to look back to you again. Because again, part of this, part of this is again, being cognizant of staff time and all the draws on your time. So we sort of have these three. I feel like we have, I feel like the TID extension was a really specific project that's very clear, very actionable. I feel like I'm getting consensus from the whole group that that project, education, determination of what to do, that whole thing is clear. The other two, I think everybody, you know, maybe not enough detail for you to know what direction to take. Should we take each one of those and try to dig into them further?
Well, I thought I might have heard some sort of consensus, but then I got confused as to maybe I didn't. So the TID, I think, is clear that needs to happen. And then I thought the other two primary, you know, discussions or actions that would take place regarded or related to the neighborhood loan program in terms of how we want to reprogram those funds, whether it's, you know, for senior improvements or sustainability or a combination of everything in between. So I thought that kind of was the one driving the next step in terms of housing priorities.
Great. Yep.
In terms of businesses, maybe this is where I got a little confused. I think there's a discussion potentially of how to reprogram the loan program. And so I know that we had initially had some discussions with WIBIC, you know, a month or so ago, and we could continue those if that is the will of the board. And what I'm hearing from tonight is that it seems like focusing those on helping existing businesses, you know, flourish is perhaps what I heard, but I don't know if that's completely true. If there is a desire to program that and require it for vitality or other things that were mentioned in previous meetings, but the three specific actions that I'm at least hearing relate to those three decisions, the TID, the neighborhood program, and the business program. Then the other kind of concepts are what I would utilize when someone asks me in terms of a developer, what does the village want to see there? I'm looking for this kind of discussion to summarize, well, we had strategic planning and there's a desire for affordable, there's a desire for senior, there's affordable, or there's a desire for daytime population, et cetera. So barring any sort of concrete motion, consideration, vote kind of thing, that's what I've heard. If that's wrong or if I'm missing something, feel free to weigh in on this. And, you know, Rebecca, if you've heard different things too, but that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of what I would take away in terms of actions for next steps, at least short term. And then as things change, you know, we bring them back to you as the needs, you know, go from there. But so feel free to.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was hoping for. But who else? What are other people's comments with respect to? Let's just focus on those three.
Well, isn't one of the things that you and Rebecca needed was when someone comes to the village and says, I have an idea for this, and but I'm going to need some participation. And you wasn't part of what we were trying to do was figure out like what types of projects we would be interested in participating in and what types of projects would we not. And I mean, wasn't that one of the reasons that you guys wanted us to go through this process?
Yeah, and a very specific example of that is actually taking place, you know, within the past month or two. We've had proposals pitched to us for a hotel versus, you know, residential. And the first thing is, you know, what does the village want to see there? Would you rather have a hotel that's a new, unique business to the village that could support vibrancy to the business district and a handful of other things?
Yes.
Or do you want more residential? Or do you want more senior? Do you want more affordable? We might want both. And so neither Rebecca nor I, you know, stopped either of those from being pursued further. So both of those development options are being considered. But I guess my hesitation is if we wouldn't want a hotel and I said, sure, pursue that, and they dropped the residential component because of that, or do we want to be flexible? I feel like right now we're the most flexible in terms of what I'm telling people, but if there are things that we specifically want me to be promoting or Rebecca to be promoting when we have these conversations, correct, that would be the desire out of this.
Bart?
Yes.
So we've been through this a million times with focus groups and studies. Rather than focus on what you want, because what you want, you may have to go out and seek and pay for. So if there's two ways to do this. There's village sponsored TIFs, like this is what we want, and this is what we'll pay for. Like in Milwaukee, the Park East Freeway, we're going to take it on the freeway, and here's the things we may pay for, a river walk, blah, blah, blah. But, or here's what we'll accept, which is if you come to us as a developer and it's a developer TIF because you need a gap financing, here's what we would never finance. And so those are the two separate types of TIFs. And I think you're focusing on is there anything you would not finance? And that is the best thing to focus on because it's the easiest. And I can tell you, like, hotel, you can go down the block and say, anyone opposed to a boutique hotel? No. Is there anyone opposed to residential, blah, blah, blah? No. Like, so being opposed to something, like, what would you not if someone came to us, is much easier than what do you want? Is it what you want? We don't have enough land or enough streetscape to do any of that. That's we've done it.
But
so
more specifically on that, and I apologize, the question was, market rate. And I've heard that we might not finance market rate. So I think there are some intricacies.
That's exactly right. Would you do that? What do you want to finance? What would you finance? And that's a great question, and it's never been answered. And so I think that it's an easy question, and I think we can solve that in a week. Like, do you want to finance market rate apartments? Do you want to finance? We have a market study now. We have a housing study, and the housing study says, don't you dare. Do you want to finance luxury apartments? And the market study says, don't you dare. And then they said, do you want to finance affordable housing? Okay, like it doesn't say don't you dare, so now you have a decision. Do you want to finance a hotel if there's a gap? There's nothing that says don't you dare, so you might say yes or no. That's a policy question. So I think that's a great conversation to have, and it's a very easy one. We've never had that.
Yeah. Rebecca wants to speak, I think.
Yep.
At a minimum, I think we need to start with just, the framework of what that discussion looks like. So you guys can say yes or no, or this is what we want in it. Because.
Well, yes or no with a market study. So yes or no, we want everything to come shoreward. I mean, who doesn't want everything that's good to come shoreward that pays taxes? But the question is, what do we really need to finance? So now we have a market study. And so then Milwaukee did this. So downtown Milwaukee did not need to finance hotels, and their market study said they didn't, or market rate or high-end retail or residential. So they said no, and everything else, they said, well, think about it. So it's not that difficult now that we have our study. I'm so proud of our study. I cannot praise our market study more. And I think all of us need to read it twice.
So what I'm hearing is that you want that built in as a part of the process.
Yes.
Okay, so that kind of gets to the framework about how we get towards some of those decisions. And so then perhaps that's one of the steps in the process if there's agreement too.
I think so.
Go ahead, Bart.
I was just gonna say, so if I'm hearing at least, well, I guess we can discuss if that's consensus by the group or not, but I would hear that as a fourth, action or outcome of this strategic planning, I know going into it, I was actually expecting TIF policy and procedure to be, one of the primary things. I think we teed up strategic planning with the housing study, so I think that kind of got more attention because it's more on top of our minds. But my memory is strategic planning was kind of the impetus for this was, to discuss TIF policy and procedure in, a board initiative from last year. So I'd be remiss if I didn't, remind us that I was expecting, or I thought that'd be the case. That adds 4 things. We can't keep adding certain things. So once again, now prioritizing the list of these things that we're identifying, I think makes sense for me, but I'll turn it back to the group to confirm that that was the consensus of at least what I'm hearing.
Could someone please review the 4 items then? For support local businesses, do we have anything concrete on that staff can act on?
The business loan program, reinstituting the business loan program.
Which has not been useful.
Well, I'm sorry. Developing a useful business loan program. I'm not saying just clean up the old one and put it back out there. The old one is dead. It's gone. It was not effective. It was not productive. Totally agree. So how do we've got funds and we've got businesses. So how do we put the funds to work to help businesses? That's the question.
Okay, and then what is number 2? Support existing homeowners through a redone neighborhood loan program that focuses on elderly, ADA changes and sustainability. Is that what we're looking at, or?
Is that duplex conversion?
It would be modifying that program for the purposes that Trustee Stokebrand just mentioned. I thought there was a third one, but
energy.
Yeah, energy efficiency, seniors and aging in place were the 3 sub-components that I wrote down. Possibly disability rates, I think, was the third one for supportive housing.
And if I could step back a little bit, I mean, I think, right, I mean, what I have in my notes to, like I said, step back just a bit is, analysis of a program. So the goal is housing, and we have within there the affordable, the seniors, affordability for them, ADA, the sustainability and efficiency, and then as an outcome for staff, perhaps, is analysis of what the programs could be available to implement those various desired outcomes.
Yes.
So trying to keep it a little bit, understanding that the different goals, the different members, and then coming back with, here's some programs that could facilitate those different goals.
And the TIF policy or strategy was 3rd or 4th, and then we had one other one that I'm missing, I think.
The TID extension, I think, was
TID extension, yep.
Can I add?
TID strategy policy is separate from TIF extension.
Yep.
Yes. How do we use TID? How do we use TIF going forward, if at all? And so I think the point is well made. Sorry, President Rosick, just on this, because that's a big project too. But I think there is consensus that we need consensus on what we would be willing to support. So maybe I think that's the project, is getting the CDA and the village board to agree on when we're not a yes to a developer and when we're shaking our head no to a developer. So you, staff, have clarity and the developer has clarity on where we're willing to participate. So I don't know that it's, because again, the overarching TID policy procedure, I feel like that's a major undertaking, but maybe it's just that first step of consensus on where we're willing to participate as a smaller project. Sorry, President Rozak, yeah.
Thank you so much. I also want to warn against, I worked in TIF for 8 years, and the economy changes. And so what we wouldn't fund during a regular economy, and I have no qualms about what the past administration did in the village, because when you're in recession, you fund different things. I mean, when Milwaukee was in a recession, we came up with a housing loan program to give out millions of dollars so that, because the banks weren't. So I have no problem with flexibility of saying this project I can't fund, this project I would fund. I do think it's important though to set parameters like what's your rate of return? Because I watch in the village of Shorewood of what's the rate of return to a developer. So when there's a gap financing need, ours was 20% for Metro Market. That's really high to me. Now, maybe because it's a 2-story building, but again, there's components to deals that if you're talking about TIF, that maybe you want to structure differently. Like in Milwaukee, ours was like 14 to 18%. So those are some of the things you want to look at. But most importantly to me was when Milwaukee adopted their application process. And it took a while, but it really served a purpose. And the purpose was in a good economy or bad economy, I don't even remember what it was, but you get a lot of applications and it's a lot of staff time. You got a lot of Rebecca, you got a lot of Bart, you got a lot of, staff time talking to people and they don't know whether to say yes or no. And it really helped in my eyes, in everyone's eyes, when they developed an application. Fill it out, pay $5,000, and we'll look at it. And when we look at it, we'll decide as staff, our team, whether or not it passes muster, and we'll advance it to the decision makers. And if we do, then you have to give us another $10,000. And if you give us another $10,000 and it passes Common Council, which is the board, we'll give you back that $10,000, but not the first 5. So it really weeded out all the, I'm just going to ask because I'm going to ask. Everyone wants money. So just think about that application process, because 8 years in working with TIF, and I can tell you that that was the best thing we ever did to help cut down on staff time, to help confusion. Are you serious about the project? And if you are, we'll be serious about you. And the policy that they put in place, we put in place, is very similar to everything else. But it was the application process that really helped. So I just wanted to share that with people.
Chair Hammond, I want to support those comments. As you're having your discussion, TID the extension, whether or not to proceed with TID extension to number 1, I see as the most critical topic. Number 2 would be TID policy. And with that, in my for a reference point would be that application process and the parameters outlined in that. There needs to be some direction on those issues. And I see those 2 rising above business loan program and any type of home loan program at this time.
Okay.
That was it.
Adjournment.
Someone motion to adjourn?
No. I mean, I think that's, again, I don't know that we need to go further, because again, the whole point was to narrow it down, and those are 2, to me, I mean, I agree, very, very tactical, very relevant. I guess I struggled a bit with the TIP policy because I guess I was just thinking in this environment, I'm not sure we're going to do a lot of, I don't know, I'm so thinking about current people and current Shorewood people that would we really go down the path of development activity. But again, as I've said, you never know what's going to come to you, and so you should be prepared for it, because it could be an amazing project that we didn't even think about that's going to help everybody. So you can never say no. So
and just to follow that a little bit, when we talk about the application and the policy, I guess it sounds pretty boring to most people. But here's what it means for us on a practical level. We want to be, Bart and I, we enjoy working with people. We want to guide them and help them in the process and how they interact with our community. When someone comes to us, the best thing we can do is provide them with clear information about how a process is going to work and how we're going to interact with them. People don't want to be surprised. There's enough surprises in life. I think we can all agree the last couple of months is kind of a testimony to that, But at a minimum, we want to be clear about what that process is. We want to make it, clear so that people know what type of investment and time they want to spend with us. And then when they're with us, you know, I think we're pretty nice people. We want to make it an enjoyable experience. And, you know, and then maybe we get to the point where, you know, you guys are more specific about what you want to target. You know, it seems maybe a little bit scary as we go into it, or maybe controversial, but I think if we just, you know, took some baby steps leaning into it, we can get there. And by no means was I looking to shut down the meeting when I provided my comments. It's just I felt
That's good, Rebecca.
Well, that's very helpful.
I felt badly for not speaking up, and I was trying to be respectful of her.
All right, but we still technically have 4, right?
Yes.
Is
So
that too
then,
many?
Peter, if I could just,
Yes.
so number 1 would be the TIF extension toward housing, coming up with what that would cost, what it would mean versus just giving the money back to the taxpayers. Number 2 would be the TIF policy strategy item that would look into an application process with a $5,000 initial fee, $10,000 for the second step. You get $10,000 back if it doesn't go any farther. Number 3 then would be the neighborhood loan program, finding a way to work that so that it would go more towards senior housing, disabled housing, and energy efficient housing. And then would number 4 be developing a useful business loan program?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just on your TIF, I'm not sure we would be that prescriptive to say the 5,000 and the 10,000. That,
Right.
you know, we would to come up with the policy and
Correct.
what it looks like. Yep.
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
So I just wanted to share, and Bart, you can jump in, but I think one of the things that's helpful, and I guess I want to have a level of understanding on, is that we work towards them in that order. So here's what typically happens, and this is not a new story to any of you, but there's a lot of people that want different things at different times, you know, and right now, I think what's been great about this conversation is everybody's acknowledged that we need to adjust and reshuffle, you know, based upon our current conditions. So if there's agreement to proceed in that order, then we can also be clear with people, for example, who ask us about the business loan program or the home loan program. No one's saying that they're not important. We're just saying that we're going to get to it. It's, you know, it's in the queue, but we're going to proceed in that manner.
Yep.
And if that's accurate, you can all nod or give a thumbs up. But if not, then we'll probably have to have some different discussion.
No, I think that's the exact order. And let me hear from who does not agree that, well, who thinks there's something else on the list? I hope not. And then with respect to the items we just identified, that they disagree with that priority order. Anybody? No? Okay. Well, that's pretty darn good direction for you, I think.
This is outstanding. Not only that, but I think my children upstairs are going to be amazed that they might just get dessert. They're still awake.
I want dessert too. Where's my dessert?
I know. I'm thinking to myself, I have no unhealthy food in this house right now. I don't know what to give them.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Well, just to close it, I mean, I don't want to, Art and Michaela, you know, I think we accomplished what we were looking for.
Take the
Do you
vote.
have any? Sorry?
Yeah, you can't do that. If someone moves to adjourn, you have to go right to
Yeah,
it.
you can take the
Oh, I
vote.
do? I can't have
Yeah.
discussion? I
Nope.
can't have discussion?
Nope.
Really? I thought there was always discussion.
Here, I think you should take the win.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Oh, thank you so much, you guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.